Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going to be going over my Poison Rogue Death Knight Necromancer. So before we get into the video, I would suggest liking and commenting on the video if you enjoy my content, as that's the best way to let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job. Now, with this build, I really enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. Like, I love the crap out of this build, as we're doing insane amounts of damage thanks to lethal concentration, which is a two-handed pole arm that pretty much makes it so that our minions leech poison damage as life. Now, this didn't exist before, this kind of effect, like where your poison damage for your minions were leeched as their life. Uh, this existed like in very small places randomly, but not for Necromancer. And this allows you to run poison on all your stuff and allows your minions to tank a lot more than what they normally would tank. Now, this isn't as immortal, quote unquote, as Stormcrows, as Stormcrows get all of the Beastmaster benefits, like, of course, all the DR and stuff. So you will see your minions die every so often with this, but it's nowhere near as much as if, of course, they didn't have Leech. The Leech on top of 2 minion health regen rolls is enough to make them into, like, really, really tanky minions. And they do a lot of damage too. The ramp up is insane. If you're watching the Oribus footage, like, the ramp up is insane, and you don't have to take damage. They'll deal it all for you, which is really cool. Now, you do have to, another thing about the lethal concentration is, so the way Jade Dust works. So Jade Dust is a buff that you have a 25% chance on melee hit with Harvest to apply Jade Dust to yourself for 4 seconds. Now, Jade Dust originally gives you 50% poison chance with your minions on hit. This is generic. This works for spells, attacks, whatever. And then, of course, it triples if you're using a throwing attack, like if your minion's using a throwing attack. And this is very specific thanks to the fact that rogues have 2 throwing attacks in their arsenal. Now, these attacks, they're cooldown based, so you have to run a bunch of minion cooldown recovery speed to make it worth it. But once you do, the shurikens and the acid flask together with the cooldown recovery speed does a lot of poison damage thanks to the Jade Dust buff. Now, a viewer of mine actually asks, hey, why aren't you running Death Knights? I'm like, why? I was like, because they work with cooldown too. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh yeah, the Hungering Souls version. Yes, Hungering Souls Death Knights, they're very good for clear. Like, for instance, my minions, they can just hop into a pack and instantly blow it up with all the poison from all the shurikens, all the acid flasks, all the necrotic mortars from the skeleton Death Knights, and of course all the hungering souls from the skeleton Death Knights. All of this combined equals a lot of clear. And this is by far one of the best clear speed focused necromancers I've ever played. This is better than Clear Speed Necro 2.0 because of all the attack speed, the movement speed, all the extra projectiles, the extra AoE, because the acid flasks, they hit an AoE, the shurikens, they hit an AoE, and then of course the necrotic mortars do, and then the hungering souls in combination with everything else allows you to actually stack a lot of poison. Thanks to all of this, this allows you to clear monoliths really fast as a necromancer. Now, obviously, this is a necromancer. They're always slow. It doesn't matter what you do, but it's a lot better than what other necromancers have been doing of late. And I'll be honest, I think the community has kind of been trying to find a good necromancer build after all the nerfs, because solo golem sadly doesn't work anymore, at least to the same extent it used to. So we're trying to find other minion builds. Like, the solo minion archetype was effectively killed once they turned Death Seal's cooldown from 6 seconds on that to 18 seconds. I'm going to be honest, that definitely kills the archetype, at least for me, as I don't want to have to wait 18 seconds to recast my Dredge Jade just because my Bone Golem died to some random, like, one shot. So yeah, it's kind of sad that solo golem stuff has been nerfed so hard, but that's completely fine. Uh, Other things about this build, we're using Aura of Decay for the healing effectiveness, for the healing, the missing health healed. We're trying to go for as much HP as possible, which applies to your Aura of Decay as well, so you can, obviously keep your HP up. One issue I have with this build is the fact that you're using a two-handed polearm and not a one-handed weapon, so you could use something like a Bastion of Honor. And that is a big detriment of the build. It means that you have to focus a lot more on survivability than if you're running like a one-handed version with like of course, a shield. That does not help much, but the damage more than makes up for it, as you can tell in the footage, and the clear speed as well. So you just have to make sure you don't die, and you'll do completely fine. Other than that, there's not really much else I can really talk about here, so we're going to go in game here. All right, here we are in game with the build, the Necromancer here. Yeah, let's ignore the name. So this build was actually the second build I leveled this patch, but the Ignite Volatile Zombies did not function. So we ended up playing Necromancer instead with Lethal Concentration. So I can show you the single target DPS here, just because why not, right? So what I've found with this build is like, it's just really enjoyable to play than like other Necromancers I found. So we're going to actually... So make sure that they're in your Aura of Decay area, otherwise they won't be dealing them more damage. As you can tell, the Jade Dust Speed debuff is actually on your bar, which is really neat. Always make sure to have your Jade up too. You can kind of pretty much just spam this. And we're going to look here. About 500,000. That's plenty for most situations, right? Now, we're going to talk about skills. So for Skeleton, I have a 23 Skeleton. You do not need a 23 Skeleton. I have a +3 here. But you do not need a 23. You actually can get away with a 22. I would just not run 1 point in Impatience and you'd be completely fine. You don't need a 23. I'm just showing off my wealth, I guess. So we take 2 points travel into Sweeping Strikes, 1 point travel into Skeleton Rogue, so it enables Skeleton Rogue. So no, this, all it does is allow them to enter the pool. Now you have to go and you have to grab Shambling Steel and Mightier Than the Sword to make it so all of your minions are rogues, right? Technically, you could deal with one warrior and remove this point and you'd have an extra point, but I think it's worth the point investment to have the extra rogue. Now we take 1 point into Acid Flask. This is just an extra attack. I can show you actually what it looks like. So I can show you what their attacks look like. So for the Skeleton Rogue here, he has an Acid Flask, a Shuriken, and a Teleport. As you can tell, he's constantly using his abilities. That's because I have a lot of minion cooldown recovery speed. Yeah, so if we hold Alt here, Shuriken has a 4-second cooldown, Teleport has an 8-second cooldown, and then Acid Flask has a 5-second cooldown. But of course, we have a bunch of cooldown recovery speed here, and eventually once you get better idols, you'll have cooldown recovery speed on the suffixes of these idols as well. You have 4 of these and 4 cooldown recovery speed, which would make them do this even more, which would be really strong. But the base 120% you get from here is plenty, right? Then, of course, we take 3 points travel into Unholy Rage, 1 point into Marrow Walkers for an extra skeleton, 1 point into Lone Guardian travel, then 1 point into Mightier Than Sword to remove warriors from the pool, 3 points into Necrotic Conviction for more damage, 1 point into Hollow Walkers for an extra skeleton, 1 point into Shambling Steel so that skeleton archers are removed, so you only have rogues, then 1 point travel into Bone Armor because you have no skeletal minions, and then of course 4 points into Impatience. So now the way this works is this is global cooldown recovery speed for him as well, so it applies to all 3 of his abilities at once. As you can tell, he is like constantly using his abilities. So skeletons, their AI, like just in general, like minion melee AI sucks. But thankfully, thanks to the cooldown, we're always using ranged abilities or the teleport. As you can tell, pretty much you're either using the Acid Flask, the Shuriken, or the teleport. And most of the time that keeps them busy and too busy to use melee attacks, right? Do not go for individual operator. I have 11 rogues. I think I have 10 rogues. So this is divided between your max summonable rogues. This is not good unless if you have a small amount of rogues. It kind of just doesn't work because it gets divided. So for instance, if I have 4 points in this, I would have 20% cooldown recovery speed and 20% more damage. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound good to me at all. So I would heavily suggest not grabbing into that, as this is only good if you do some memes with like Dread Phalanx. But the issue with Dread Phalanx is it's kind of bad because it doesn't have more HP. I hope the devs fix that, add some more HP to this node too, and they might actually be usable in this regard. But yeah, and then individual operator would be worth it, and you could run 5 skeletons instead. And that's pretty much it for Summon Skeleton. For Summon Skeletal Mage, i.e. Dread Knight, we take 3 points into Stellar Mortis for movement speed and travel, 1 point into Order of Death. You could technically put 2 points into Shadow Wardens, but the ward and the crit avoidance doesn't matter because I'm already solving crit avoidance elsewhere. We take 4 points into Splintered Dominion. This makes it so that the Hungering Souls that they cast have 4 extra projectiles, and their melee attacks actually have more AoE, so I can actually show you what this looks like. Here, just give me a second here. And of course, 3 points into Leech Life. This actually applies to your poison as well, so this is on top of the amount that that lethal concentration gives you. 1 point into Death Knights, so that we always summon Death Knights and it removes all the other Skeletal Mage types, so we don't have to worry about that. Then 1 point into Death Blossom. So Death Blossom allows them to use Hungering Souls, as you can tell there. And then there's Necrotic Mortar, which you'll see later. But they get to use Hungering Souls and Necrotic Mortar on a decent amount of time. These are just kind of like secondary minions. If we could have 5 extra rogues, we would, but we can't, so it's fine. Then 1 point into Undead Mortars. This is just an area of effect attack, and it's applied by the cooldown recovery speed you'll have eventually on your idols. And then 3 points into Battle Harden, which is another 100% cooldown recovery speed. So he's pretty much able to spam his skills as well. Eventually, when you have more cooldown recovery speed, you'll be able to spam your skills even more, which will get really strong. And then, of course, 3 points into Putrid Essence for the poison chance. That's pretty much it for Skeletal Mage. Dread Shade. It's your stereotypical Dread Shade setup. The only thing that's different is we're grabbing Vile Ghast, as it makes it so we have about 100% chance to poison, and there's a bunch of increased poison damage for our minions, which is really strong. Then, of course, we grab Enemy of My Enemy so that we can attach it as a debuff. Usually Dread Shade works a lot better as a curse, as you just put it on Oribus and your minions go to town. Put it on the boss, that's when you need damage. You can just kind of like auto cast it. It's kind of like Rift Blood, where it auto targets like the nearest enemy. So overall, it's pretty strong in that regard. Everything else is your stereotypical setup. There will be a build planner in the description. Harvest, it has a few things going for it. So we take 2 points travel into Finality. The coal is pretty nice. I wish I could put an extra point in it, but there's nothing I can do about that. You could probably take 1 point at Giant Scythe, but I'll explain why that's good later. Then, of course, 5 points into Skull Shards. This makes it so Harvest, when you hit with Skull Stack, so for instance, if you hit 6 minions, 6 enemies, you will get 300% more minion damage for their next attack, I believe. I believe their next attack. It doesn't, like, it's kind of weird. I don't know how this exactly works, but I believe if you hit 6 targets with your Harvest, it will give all your minions one extra attack, like attack that they have 300% more damage with, which works for your poisons. It does work for the poisons. It's just kind of like hard to quantify. When you're clearing, it feels amazing, but for single target, it's kind of annoying because you have to hit the enemy 6 times. So, but when you're clearing, this is amazing. Then we take 1 point into Undead Harvest. It makes it so minions will prioritize the targets that I hit with my Harvest, meaning that when I'm walking around and I hit something with Harvest, they attack that. That's very nice quality of life. Makes the melee Necromancer playstyle, quote unquote, that is enabled by lethal concentration. It makes it pretty fun. So that's one fun thing about the build. Then 4 points in the Great Scythe. The reason why we want so much area is if I'm standing behind my minions and I'm trying to damage the enemy, right? I want to be able to actually damage the enemy. What I was finding before when I had no AoE was I would have to be right up next to the enemy to do the Jade Dust thing, right? Well, the issue with that is you die because you're too close to the enemy. So generally you want the Great Scythe to be a little bit farther away so you can actually, do damage while also being safe. 2 points travel into Spectral Whetstone. The space crit is important for later. 3 points into Learn Weakness for crit chance. Then, of course, 2 points into Steel Youth. This pretty much makes it so that whenever I crit every so often, I get a buff of movement speed, so I can move around faster. That was actually one of the other issues I had with the build, was because since everything was so tight on gear, I couldn't get enough movement speed. But thanks to the node inside Necromancer, River of Bones, it gives us 100% increased chance to crit. And then, of course, we have 6% base crit from this node. We're at 11% chance to crit times 100%. That's 220. That's 22% chance to crit overall. So 1 in 5 attacks gives me Steel Youth. So I can always at least be moving. It's a lot easier to do it in packs, but once I crit, eventually, there you go, get the movement speed. Very strong. Aura of Decay. Aura of Decay is your stereotypical healing tree. One thing is, though, we grab the point Plague Bearer to give our minions poison chance. Our minions are poisoned every second, but as you can tell, thanks to their health regen, this does no damage to them whatsoever. Then, of course, 3 points into Infectious Bones, so it's just 150% more damage. So you want to be on top of the boss. You want to be with your minions so that they do more damage. Otherwise, they won't do as much damage. And, of course, everything else is your stereotypical setup. I do grab Respite so that I have poison resistance while in Aura of Decay. It helps me cap my poison res. And I also take less damage with poison while Aura of Decay is active. So it makes it pretty much low. I never died of poison with this build, ironically, because of the way Aura of Decay works. It was pretty cool. That's pretty much it for skills. Let's talk about passives. So passives, I take 8 points to Forbidden Knowledge. You want as much intelligence as possible as you can cram as possible because that gives your minions base health. Necrotic Res is very strong because it allows us to skip some gearing later on. 5 points into Dark Rituals. Make sure to always be casting your minions as you're moving through packs, and it will give your harvest a little bit more of an attack speed buff so that you can use the skull stacks more often and keep your crit chance, keep your crit movement speed buff up. 3 points travel into Blood Aura for increased minion damage. 8 points into Stolen Vitality for vitality and minion health, very strong. 1 point travel into Putrid Demise. Then 6 points into Minion of Rot. This is actually one of the best nodes in the entire tree for you, as if we look in lethal concentration, it makes it so your poison damage modifiers also apply to your skeleton rogues. So pretty much this is 42% increased minion poison damage and 42% increased poison chance, which is really, really, really strong as a 6-pointer. So yeah. For Lich, we just take 8 points into Survival of the Cruel because you want as much HP as possible. Then, of course, when we get up to level 100, we'll be filling out Apocrypha because you want as much intelligence as possible. Then we take 8 points into Elixir of Hunger because HP, because the more HP you have, the more effective, Aura of Decay is. 5 points travel into Risen Army. 1 point travel into Blood Armor, 10 points into Mortal Tether. You want as much minion health as possible so that when your minions do take a hit, they can leech it back and heal it back quick enough. 1 point into Unbound Necromancy for the extra point. 8 points into Tyrant. You want health. I never have issues with my minions dying often, except for when things get ridiculous with like Chapter 9. But you definitely want this node as that gives you a lot of HP. Like I said, since you're running Lethal Concentration, you have to focus on your own defense instead. 5 points into Frantic Summons so that our minions have increased cast speed and attack speed. 5 points into River of Bones. So this increased minion health leech, that will apply to the 8% minion poison damage, leeches life from Lethal Concentration, which is very, very strong. And then also gives us a crit chance for our harvest as well, which is really nice node. 1 point into Tyrant's Legion. You don't need the poison penetration, as your skeletons, they poison enough that you get so many poison stacks that it doesn't matter. You don't need penetration, and there are better things to be putting your points into, but you at least want 1 point into it so you get the extra skeleton. Then 8 points into Cling to Life. You want minion all res. On blessings as well, I was not able to get a all res blessing. I did get a CSA blessing, but later on when you have better gear, you definitely want a minion all res blessing, as the less damage your minions take, the better. 3 points travel to Empty the Graves. 1 point into Disciples of Necromancy, so we get an extra skeleton mage, so we're at 5. Then 5 points into Veins of Malice, which gives our minions Frenzy and Haste, which is very strong while clearing. You can tell, like, when you clear with that, it's like insane. That's pretty much it for the skill tree. Like I said, once you have the rest of your points, probably go into Apocrypha. Now for gearing, so for idols, the idols we want, so we have healing effectiveness here and a minion chance to apply Mark for Death. You at least one of these, and then all 3 other idols you have need to be healing effectiveness plus minion cooldown recovery speed. That will make it so your minions, they will spam the shuriken and the acid flask and all that, and they'll also spam the skeletal knights will also spam the Hungering Souls and the Necrotic Mortar. You want as much cooldown as possible so that they're literally just spamming their throwing attacks, because they do most of their damage with their throwing attacks thanks to Jade Dusk, right? So you want as much throwing attack stuff as possible. So you want to be running cooldown recovery speed. You run 4 of those, run 4 healing effectiveness idols. I'm just running HP right now because I don't have nearly enough healing effectiveness idols, and I definitely don't have healing effect minion cooldown recovery speed idols. But like I said, trust me, they're definitely worth it for the build because I've been running so for instance, we can actually test this. So for instance, our minion here, you can watch him. He uses his abilities every so often, but if we get some minion cooldown recovery speed, like this minion, get some minion cooldown recovery speed, we can definitely showcase what this looks like here. Just give me a moment. I got a lot of them. Okay, that should be plenty. So let's test this. Right, you can watch how fast he's attacking now, and then once we move into the cooldown recovery speed here, he's going to be speeding Gonzalez here in a second. So right now he's like okay. But then as we add the cooldown recovery speed and resummon him, right? He's gonna summon a new one. And then we're gonna get rid of him, and then we're going to summon the skeleton. He should be spamming his abilities way more. And now he's pretty much only attacking with his acid flask or his shuriken. He melee attacks every so often, but as you can tell there, he only attacks with the throwing attack and only attacks with his acid flask and uses his teleport often, which is what you want. Now, the issue with this is you don't get the healing effectiveness from the idols, and the idols' healing effectiveness are kind of how you survive. So it's kind of like a bit of an issue in that regard. But obviously you can get minion cooldown recovery speed and healing effectiveness idols. So overall, you should be fine once you get those special idols. So that's definitely a lot of investment you can put into this build. The idols are very important for this build. That's why we spent so long talking about it. Now, for uniques that are required, lethal concentration is required to make the build function properly. You can get away with not using it for a while, but if you go here, you go to Reign of Dragons. Reign of Dragons have echo nodes that will let you farm specifically for it. So there are only a few unique polearms in the game, and that makes it so that when you look for an echo reward, right, we'll look for a timeline echo reward for polearm here. I don't know if we have a polearm specifically. I don't know if we'd have a polearm. So for instance, here we have rare swords. That's not what we're looking for. I'm trying to find it here specifically. I got my CSA blessing like first try, which was really cool. Where is it? Here. Well, okay. We got, where is it? Yeah, it's so weird. I'm trying to find a unique thing. Well, it would be like this. It would be, it looks like this, but it would have a polearm instead. It would like look like a polearm or whatever. That's what you're looking for. And that has a chance to drop the lethal concentration, and you can target farm for it. Now, the other unique that we utilize is Ribbons of Blood, as this gives us increased leech rate, which will make it so our leech happens faster for our minions. And then, of course, we also have your minions cannot be crit, meaning you don't have to worry about minion critical strike avoidance at all with this ring. And then to continue on with gear, this helmet is literally perfect. Nothing I would change about it other than maybe getting minion health on the implicit instead of minion damage, but it's gonna like so and so. For the amulet, this amulet is pretty much perfect. You're just missing minion damage or health instead of the elemental damage. This chest is absolutely positively perfect. I'm so happy I dropped this and I was able to craft it. Made playing this build a lot more fun. But yeah, this is exactly what you want. You want it on a better base, though. I do have a trashy base. You can get it on endurance percentage base, or you can get it on a cold res base. Either way, it saves you a suffix. Then for the belts, we want minion damage. Well, we either want minion damage or minion health regen. The cleanse and HP, because you want as much HP as possible. The ring, we're just running HP, health regen, some res. On that other prefix, you want minion health or intelligence. Either one works. For the gloves, we have minion health, intelligence, HP. That last HP roll could be like something like crit avoidance. It could be something like that, something like that. You could also, like I said, you could run crit avoidance here and then run crit avoidance somewhere else, maybe on this ring eventually, because you want to be crit avoidance capped so that you can change the Reign of Dragon's Blessing into a minion all res, so your minions survive even more disgusting stuff. This is perfect boots, pretty much. Nothing I would change here. Maybe turn that vitality to minion health regen, but that's about it, or intelligence. And then, of course, minion health, healing effectiveness, resistance, HP. You want it on the rune bones base. It's pretty your standard minion fare, right? Nothing too different. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the build this time, guys. Sorry it was such a long discussion, but there was a lot of things to discuss about this build, as there always is with minion builds, because they're very in-depth and very complicated. But if you've got this far in the video, I'd heavily suggest following the Twitch in the description, as that's where I stream all of my gameplay. Well, most of it. Whenever I'm playing online, I'll be streaming. And like I said, I want to thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and bye.